Hello, welcome to Enlightning. I'm so excited for today's episode with the illustrious Paris Pittman, who has so many titles. I'm going to read them off. You're the member of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, so the Cncf Governing Board.
Yeah.
You're Kubernetes Steering Committee member, and you're Emeritus Special Interest Group, which is SIG, Contributor Experience Chair. So with all the acronyms, the way to be say that you're the Emeritus SIG Contributor Experience Chair. Doesn't Contributor Experience also have a shortened way to say it? Contribex.
kind of like DevX, developer experience, contributor experience.
Nice.
Very sort of similar in nature of themes and dealing with personas and making sure they have a good experience.
I love that. So your titles all sound really important and amazing, and I'm impressed, but I have no idea what they mean. But that's the whole point of today's episode.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, we're going to learn all about those acronyms today.
Yes, and if we can all remember, I want to revisit your titles at the end of the episode after we've already talked about what it all means.
So we can quiz people and make sure they pass the test.
So we can all be properly impressed by your accomplishments.
We need to have a driver's license these days to operate open source and to participate in open source, and this is the prereq for that driver's test.
I'm picturing people, and no shade, but I'm picturing people who, like, in the background, they have their, like, degrees hanging on the wall and sort of. Do you get like a certificate or any sort of like concrete memento of your status that you can display proudly?
I have not. Maybe we should, but I do. You can't see it now, but I do have tons of amazing gifts and accolades that people have sent me for work that I've done with some of those roles. So many people on the project do. We have recognition as one of our kind of like our core tenets.
That's amazing.
It is. And we have like a shout out channel on Slack. We really love when people get recognition, and several people have recognized me in the past, and I like to pay it forward.
Nice. And when you say Slack and contributor experience, we're talking about the Kubernetes Slack and the Kubernetes project.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. And thanks for keeping me honest. Do that this whole time. Okay.
And we have Lisa May is here. Hello. She says she's taking notes. So
I'm so sorry, Lisa. I know. Lisa, in the chat at any time, if you feel like we've gotten too acronymy or you're like, what's going on? Just ask.
Please call us out. Yes, absolutely. Yes. 100%. Every show. Yeah, I want to keep this accessible. It's one of my personal core tenets for this show. So if I ever get away from that, let me know.
Yes. That's one of the hardest things that I've had to actually intentionally try to do better over the years. Because, when you're working so deep in something, we all know that, when we're talking to people of like minds, our acronyms are just kind of flying and we don't even recognize it, So it's not even intentionally, exclusive. I think it's just, years of working on something, and then all of a sudden you have this like vocabulary now. But yeah, always keep me honest.
We have a hi from India. Hello.
Hey.
Thanks for coming. And you're up
from
late.
Seattle.
And hello from Austin, Texas. Talking about jargon, do you know, so I learned in my journey to learn Kubernetes, I pretty quickly figured out that I needed to be able to talk about it easily and quickly. And one tool that I used for that was I made flashcards of the Kubernetes glossary.
Nice.
And so in doing so, I found like some typos or some things that weren't clear to me as a beginner. And I got a little bit involved in the SIG docs. By SIG is Special Interest Group. Yes, I got involved in the docs community a little bit. They're very wonderful. And I've done like a couple little PRs on the project, but Yeah, so that is maybe even the beginning of my curiosity about like what do all these titles mean and how it is pretty overwhelming as someone brand new stepping in. Like, what do I need to know just to make one pull request, or can I, as like a little baby gangster, like little person who doesn't know much, can I mess something up? Like that was a real fear for me. Like, what if I break something? But now I know that's not really possible. There are tons of checks and balances in place.
There are tons of checks and balances in place. That is correct. And quick shout out though to the glossary. That's actually great. That I love the glossary. We have so many people that give us accolades on the glossary, and it's very similar stories to you. And I just want to give a shout out to all of the contributors that contribute to the glossary. If you're out there and you think a word should be added to the glossary, it's quite possible it should be. Submit PRs. And I mean, we can talk about that later too, but that's always a great place for people to get started.
Learning the glossary gave me confidence that like a topic about Kubernetes can't come up that I don't at least have some context for like what it means. Like I might, clearly I don't know anything deep about it, but at least I know something to be able to carry the conversation. And we have some comments from chat. Where does this come from? HumanOps. I think, did we make up the term, or you make up the term for HumanOps?
We did. Well,
the show title.
We did. And it was because of the, it came from like it stemmed from the idea of us going over the CNCF landscape, except for the humans of the CNCF landscape. So the human operations of these ginormous projects.
And we have a hello from Napalm. Thanks for coming this week. I'm very interested in the humans of the project because I'm aware that there must be such competing interests, like business-wise and even personal-wise. Like if we take this path, and that'll be a project I lead, and that makes me feel important. But then this other person wants to go this way, and how does that get navigated and resolved? But we don't have, that's like what I'm curious about. I think we'll naturally get to it from behind the board. And so I'm going to start actually moving over there because I know your time is limited today. We were chatting before the stream started about Animal Crossing. And we both played a lot of it at the beginning of the pandemic. And I think what you told me is that you've kept playing it since then. And I'd love to hear what you started to say, and I want to know more about is how Animal Crossing is like meditation for you.
Yes.
Yeah, talk to me.
People always ask me, you know, how am I surviving the pandemic? Like, how am I staying mentally healthy? And how am I breaking up my workday in front of the computer? And my answer is always Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing for me has been meditative. In the morning, I wake up, I do my chores in real life. I do my chores in Animal Crossing. But there's just something about like planting and watering flowers in Animal Crossing that is so meditative. And collecting all of the things that are so cute, you all. They are the cutest things ever. And I think it's been really helpful for me. It's been a good outlet. I know it's a wonderful outlet for everyone else. The community is so strong. I buy and sell and trade cute stuff from Animal Crossing on Nookazon. I'm a 5-star. I'm a 5-star hustler. Not many people know that about me.
So what is Nookazon now?
Nookazon is just a trade platform online. But it's
nice. So you're on the real internet.
Yes, the real internet.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I love the community. It's so lovely. I love having people over to my island. I love having parties. I know that's something that we have in common, is that we both have celebrated our birthdays on an island.
Definitely had an Animal Crossing birthday.
Shout out to everyone out there that has had Animal Crossing birthdays. I feel like we should get t-shirts or something, you know?
For mine, we set up a Zoom call next to the game. I say we, my son and I. And then I also dressed in an outfit to perfectly match my Animal Crossing avatar. Yeah.
Love it.
Does anyone else in the chat play Animal Crossing by any chance? When you say your daily chores, so I'm sure excited for hybrids all the time if you're watering flowers, right?
Yeah, no, I've got every color. Actually, I think my island only has hybrids and the special ones. I don't think it has any of the normal ones. I love the gold roses, and I love all of the black flowers.
Yeah.
They're so different and amazing. my island is honestly one of my greatest achievements. It's adult Minecraft, in my opinion. But
Minecraft can be adult Minecraft too, but yeah,
exactly. Yes, excuse me to all my friends who still play Minecraft. I apologize. Yeah. And I've got like 8 to 10 stores. I have like this whole resort thing. I have like a hotel. I have spa. So
I might need to fire mine back up just to come visit.
Will you come visit?
I have to ignore all my weeds. Yeah.
Will you come? Please come visit.
Hell yeah, that sounds amazing. If it's how could I? First of all, of course, but like you're like, this is one of my greatest accomplishments. I'll be like, nah, I can't be bothered to come visit. That would be rude. Okay. All right, let's get to work.
Yes.
So we're talking about the humans in CNCF specifically, right? The cloud native.
Yeah. Well,
we have a fun.
Yes. And Kubernetes.
And Kubernetes. Okay. So we're going to dig into, is this a talk on people or the dangers of digital addiction?
George, I know this is the dangers of digital addiction. I mean, some people could even say that Kubernetes is a dangerous digital addiction. So. Well, yeah, let's start with CNCF because I'll tell you why it's a good start point. It's a good start point because Kubernetes, the largest graduated project, is a project of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. It was the seeded project. And so Cloud Native Compute Foundation is a nonprofit. It is a 501c6. That is equivalent, if you're in the States, of sort of like the NFL and other associations that are like it.
What did you just say? The what FL?
NFL, like National Football Association.
Oh, okay. Okay. I like that.
Yep. And it's a bunch of member companies who have gotten together to support projects that are within the CNCF. And now there are over, I think the last time I checked, forgive me, TOC for not knowing the exact number, but I think it is over 140 now. 140 projects and specs and standards and things like that are going through maturity processes.
So the members of CNCF are companies, not humans.
Yeah,
companies. Yep. Okay, and then
the humans are the contributors. That's the word that we would use in that situation.
Okay, are companies.
Yeah.
Okay. Already, I'm learning.
Yeah.
And contributors are humans. Okay. Well, I'm not going to write that because it's the only logical thing. Yeah. But and then you said about how many projects are there right now?
It's over 140. Someone in chat, if you want to count all of them, please do. But yeah, no, the last time I checked, I think it was 140. I think George, I see George in chat. George is actually part of one of the 140 projects.
Okay.
George works at Cloud Custodian, which is one of the projects that are in CNCF currently. I think y'all are in Incubation, I think, or getting there.
So that's a whole other can of worms you just opened.
That is yes, because the idea of the CNCF is to shepherd projects through graduation and then obviously support projects past graduation. And for folks who are like wondering like what's graduation and stuff like that, there's 3 different maturity levels that the CNCF does due diligence for. Actually, that's technically the Technical Oversight Committee.
Okay.
But ideally there's 3. There's Sandbox. That's where companies come together to collaborate on an idea to it's like the first initial step after, coming into the foundation with a baby project.
So how do you even, I imagine there's some sort of criteria to even get into the foundation as a baby project, or you have 1 million. Okay.
It's not many though. It's the idea. Yeah. The idea with the foundation, or excuse me, the idea with the Sandbox is that it's really just a neutral playground. And if something, and then if things, mature from there, then there is an incubation application. And that incubation application is really where things start cooking. And yeah, that's where, the incubated word right there is great, because that's really where you start to get a lot of CNCF benefits. Like, for instance, things like spots and time and slots at KubeCon and, all kinds of like outreachy kind of things to help you grow your different kinds of contributor bases and stuff like that. And then after that, once you have reached sort of a stable journey, if you will, you can fill out an application for graduation, you being the project maintainers. And that's how we go. And the organization, or excuse me, the committee, if you will, in the CNCF that manages this maturity process is the Technical Oversight Committee.
Okay.
And so the Technical Oversight Committee is chaired by DIMS. DIMS actually works at VMware. Hello, DIMS, and everyone out there that knows DIMS. DIMS is awesome.
I want to pause for a second just to acknowledge some chats. We have Grub DJ. Welcome. Thank you for coming. This is another very interesting topic. It definitely feels like a lot of projects. It's very difficult to keep up.
It is.
Do the 140 projects, are those sandboxed, or is that only counted once it gets up to incubation?
That's all, I believe.
That's all? Okay.
That's all.
Cool.
I think graduated projects 10 plus, I believe. At some it's obviously much smaller number. I mean, the funnel gets much smaller down to the graduation pipeline. But again, that's because we're talking about stable, production ready systems at the graduated level. Whereas Sandbox and Incubation are most likely still trying to figure something out.
Is there some, before we get to Napalm's comment, is there some sort of then implicit advice there that maybe an incubated process you shouldn't put in production? Or is
no, that's not necessarily true.
Okay.
I think that is an engineering decision that you and your team should get together and discuss. Because I think one of the a project's never going to make it to graduation unless people put, obviously, unless people start putting things in production and running things into, running things in production workloads. So, graduated projects need that validation. So,
it's a chicken or the egg thing. Yeah.
I might advise Sandbox, maybe don't necessarily put in production, but, that might be my personal take, don't necessarily come after the messenger on that one, but
nothing official.
Yeah.
So
nothing.
Napalm is saying, in terms of Sandbox, incubation, graduation, it's when you give it a degree and send it out into the real job to get the real world, to get a job and work for a living.
It's kind of like school, you're in school, you're learning things, you're making friends, you're getting your credits, and then you go up and graduate.
Nice. And then we have we love DIMS.
Yeah.
So DIMS is Technical Oversight Committee person?
Yeah, he's the chair.
Okay. Oh, nice.
Yes. So the TOC is taking in applications from all 3 of those steps. They do a large activity called due diligence. And due diligence is when they're analyzing these projects. The projects have like reports and different kinds of checkpoints and things like that. And the TOC oversees all of that. So they're a great, like, I saw a comment in chat that says it's very difficult to keep up. I kind of like using the TOC call as sort of like a podcast. I like to tune into their call to like hear kind of like about because they deep dive on projects in a very special way.
Yeah.
So you can kind of like hear the comings and goings of projects and stuff on the TOC call. So if you are out there and you're like, I don't know what any of this is about, you could tune into a TOC call and just listen.
What I love about that idea is like the same framework and language is being applied to every single project. So you have like a lens to like democratize how you view things instead of trying to like go to the project page and whatever marketing put up there. Like, I love that. That's exciting. That's an exciting thought.
Yeah. And so then another body that makes up the CNCF is the end user committee or community. I apologize. It's not necessarily a committee.
Okay. End user community. So TOC is an acronym. Does this one have an acronym?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
There will be some acronyms that'll come with this territory. But the end user community is exactly what it sounds like on face value. It is a private, they have a lot of private and public gatherings and community of practices and things like that engineers of member companies can join and talk to each other. I think it is probably one of the most special things about CNCF, especially if, I work, at a day job where I like to hear those things. I want to hear what other engineers are working on, and I don't necessarily want to wait for KubeCon. So it's a always running program for end users to get constant learning, validation, etc. And that's run by Taylor. Taylor's wonderful, but there's tons of SIGs in this group, like special interest groups and things like that. I mean, and for lack of a long explanation, SIGs are really just people who have commonalities in different parts of the projects and different projects within CNCF. SIGs can mean something different. But in this case, it's literally just folks who have commonalities. So for instance, there's like a service mesh SIG. There is a DevX SIG. So like obviously you have commonalities in those areas, or you want to deep dive in those areas, you could go to those SIGs.
Excellent.
So then the next and kind of final body.
Before we have some questions in the chat.
Yeah.
How can a project come under CNCF?
So CNCF has a website, cncf.io. There is I'm looking at it right now. There's a projects tab there. And each one of those will tell you kind of how to get in. You can even look on the technical oversight committee documentation. And in there, you'll see the application for Sandbox. So what you're looking for folks out there who have projects that they're interested in donating, whether it's their project, whether it's their employer's project, whatever it is, go and look up the Sandbox documentation. If somebody wants to put it in chat, that would be awesome. But yeah, the application for Sandbox is what you're looking for.
Excellent. And we have a second question too from Lisa May. Are projects ever scrapped in incubation?
I haven't seen any. I think what folks would like to happen and what does happen is projects who combined at that stage. I think there is a lot of collaboration that's going on during the incubation stage. And with so many projects, obviously you have some overlap. Obviously you have some competing projects. One of the things about CNCF is there's no kingmakers. And yes, they always welcome projects who might be competing with each other. Go ahead.
What's the term kingmaker?
Kingmaker means like they don't want to take preference in any one thing and make that the thing with like a capital T, like the thing, right? They want a flourishing ecosystem that, that has competition with, healthy and kind competition.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you for the questions. These are great questions. Okay, so there's a third. What would you call these sections of CNCF?
Bodies.
Okay, so there's a third body, like organizational body.
There is a third body.
All right.
And that body is the governing board.
Is that what? Ooh, I recognize that one from your title. Are you on the governing board? Yeah.
Yes. I am the Kubernetes developer representative on the governing board.
Cool.
There are 2 representatives that represent the folks that work with projects. That's myself, and then Richard Hartman is the CNCF developer rep. That's every other project.
Okay.
Kubernetes has 70,000 contributors, so it's sort of like a small city in and itself. So that's why I represent this small city.
It does give a frame of reference for how Kubernetes stacks against every other project.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, in terms of size, it's kind of like, when you look at the planetary diagrams and it's like the sun, and then everybody else. That's kind of like how it is. But the governing board does, exactly what you would think a board does. We vote. And people are like, well, what do you vote on? We vote on things like budget. We vote on things like license matters. Like, for instance, if a project wants to take in a license that we don't currently support, or if there are major business operational changes that we would like to see at CNCF level, this is the committee, or this is the body. I always say like board committee. Like I always interchange those myself. But anyway, board. The board is doing more of the strategic changes and things like that.
So if there's someone who wants to change the way things run in the CNCF, is that possible, or is this all kind of set in stone?
No,
the idea of voting gives me an idea that it could change.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it could change, definitely. I guess it just depends on, obviously, I'm going to give the like it depends principal engineer normal response. But I think it depends on who you are, and that's not to be in a disrespectful manner. It could be like, are you a project maintainer? Are you with a member company? There are different kinds of routes, right, to make change in those situations.
Okay.
So I'll give you a few of them. So you are a good example of someone that has a member company who participates in CNCF, and also people on staff who participate in the governing board. Those folks, for you personally, would be who you would go to talk to about any kinds of changes that you would like to see. So if you sit at a member company, you can go to your member representative. And on the CNCF website, there is a list of all the governing board members. So if you see somebody that you ping them. And go ahead.
And I imagine those changes, are they like any scale? Like, I have an idea for a whole new governing body, or I want more vegan options at KubeCon. Like both of those things that's how I would do it.
I mean, honestly, like worst case scenario, they tell you to go somewhere else, and again, not in a mean way. They say, hey, why don't you check out, go to a TSC meeting, or go to a SIG meeting over here. Most people in the community, we're all kind of librarians in that way, where none of us know everything, but we all sort of know at this point where we need to go to get our answers. So
I love that.
So if anybody out there has anything that they want to change about the structure, or have ideas on changing processes and things like that, talk to, like, that if in the case of TOC, you can talk to DIMS as the chair. You can go to a TOC meeting. If it's about the governing board, you can obviously go to any governing board member. The one cool thing about this community is that there's always someone to talk to, and always somebody to figure out information with you.
And my very limited experience with the Knatives also, but Kubernetes community, everyone is so kind and like willing to help and help you get in. Mm-hmm.
Oh. So that's Cncf.
So I'm going to quickly say hello to some people. You're getting some love in the chat, Paris.
Hey!
And then also Nick, the first one. Thanks for coming again this week. Speaking of kind people, wonderful. And then I kind of asked a question in the middle of the governing board. Do you feel like just the voting on these things do you feel like you've encompassed that, what the governing board does enough?
Yeah, I mean,
okay, cool.
It's a high level board that, when matters get there, it means that, they've probably gone through some other process at that point, meaning they've either gone through like project governance and the project is having an issue. For instance, like the project needs more budget. For instance, like a good example is like a security audit. Security audits are no joke expensive. And that kind of money needs to be approved by the governing board in a lot of cases, especially if it's something that's, over 100,000 US dollars. So, it really just depends on the things that are going on in the community at that time.
I have one more question about Cncf before we move on.
Yeah.
What does it take to be elected? Could I run? Not that I ever would, get elected. But like, if I want to, but it is just like anybody. You don't have to have any particular qualifications to be.
It depends. Again, that's another. That's another. It depends. For TOC, they really welcome community members of all walks of life and experience levels, but they do prefer folks that have been either working with projects already or maybe doing some kind of other community work or some other, some other kind of like, maturity modeling work. But that's not to just, that I don't mean to say that to distract folks from running. Because at the end of the day, there are certain qualifications for some of these roles. You can find those in charters and things like that.
Okay.
But just run at the end of the day. Like if this is something that you can put time into, effort into, you can stick around and do. So many of these roles that are within these groups don't have any kind of qualifications necessary. They just really want committed folks who can drive things forward at the end of the day.
That's exciting.
It is. And that's why I think that's one of the reasons why I think our community is so large. It's so large because there's so many ways to get involved and there's so many ways for folks to boost their own skills. I know a lot of folks who are just at the IC level that have roles like on the TOC and on governing board and on that are leading some of these end user community meetings and things like that. And they're actually getting leadership experience because they're leading, teams of thousands. So I think it's a really cool benefit that companies should look at for leadership training. When ICs, when ICs come to you, if you're a manager and an IC comes to you and says that they would like to gain more leadership experience, open source is great for that. I mean, our community in general is great for that. And I think it's a good way for us to grow as a community and good way for you to grow as a person and a really good way for an organization to take advantage of free leadership training.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it looks, I'm sure, great on your CV, too, at the end.
Yeah, I think if there's one thing I take away here, it's like, I have a good resume.
So I have another CNCF question, but it's more about you. Like, how did you find your way into this type of work?
Yeah, I started off as a contributor,
Contributor?
most, yeah, like most folks do, and I was contributing to Kubernetes. I was doing community management stuff with George in the chat right now. Actually, George Castro is one of my OGs, and yeah, no, we started off with SIG contributor experience, just helping contributors make their lives better. And it's a natural. I think that group is sort of this natural group to get involved if like you're interested in governance. It's a great group to get involved in at like the base level, because you're trying to, the goal of ContribX is to really just take care of the contributor population, and governance is sort of this high level extension of that, right? So I started there, and then ran for steering committee, and then ran for governing board, and that's all she wrote.
Nice. What made you feel like I want to do this? I want to run for steering committee.
I wanted to see things through, major initiatives.
Okay.
I wanted to see our growth. I wanted to participate in large scale initiatives that were going on at the time. I thought that I could, I still not thought, but I still think that I can add a lot of value with governance topics and, hairy society type of leadership responsibilities.
So when you say you started as a contributor, did you contribute with code, or did you contribute more in these community management ways? I think that's a good.
Yeah, community management ways, 100%. I mean, we can argue if like, my markdown and stuff is code, right? But the cool thing about community management with open source is that I'm still making commits, right? So at the end of the day, my work is still counted, and I say that in quotes. My work is still counted along with the engineers, and that's been actually one of the best parts about ContribX and community management work is that we've actually tied a lot of what's going on in community management with the same thing, like with the same ways that devs get credit, and again, credit, by number of commits and stuff like that. Because I'm committing constantly with policy changes to our communication guidelines, Slack guidelines, election guidelines. All of that stuff has to live in a GitHub repository. So I think that's been one of the cool parts, is that we can actually create these sort of maintainer roles, and you don't necessarily have to be an engineer. That's something that I think with the explosion of open source's popularity over the last couple of years, I think that's been part of one of the reasons of the explosion, is that I think folks have had this one-tracked thought of like what a contributor looks like. Like this like, that it has to be like a kernel dev, like it has to be the core dev.
I definitely had that.
Yeah, and that's not true. I mean, sure, you're going to need to know a little bit of GitHub UI, right? You're going to need to learn a little bit more probably about Markdown. Like there's, there's definitely some growth that I think has to happen with everyone that's interfacing with the project. But at the end of the day, you don't need to know Go. But yes, we still need Go contributors, everyone. So no, you don't need to know Go to contribute to Kubernetes, and not in certain parts. And yeah, I think that's a big myth. That's one of the we're busting a myth right now.
Love it.
But
we have a question for you in the chat. What is the licenses in the governing board? Can you brief on types of licenses?
I mean, we're talking licenses. We're talking about open source licenses, and if folks that are listening can Google, I'm going to Google it right now, but all of the accepted licenses that we have within Cncf. I see George on. If George can do that, that would be awesome, George.
What's an example of one type instead of
Apache?
Okay.
Like for instance, there's Apache There's MIT, there's BSD. Okay. Those are all the kinds of open source licenses. And there is a list of, things that are already pre-established and approved. And then if it's not on that list, so say you are working with Project XYZ, and they want to use this new unicorn license, and it's, they say it's the best because one of their dependencies relies on it, and they would like for us to absorb that license. That's where we talk about it at governing board level, and we talk about the license, and we talk about the risks, and we ask lawyers for their opinions and things like that. So that's what we mean by types of licenses and stuff like that.
Excellent. And George says they're on it in terms of the link for that list. Thank you, George.
Thank you, George.
All right. I feel I've exhausted all of my CNCF questions so far. I've reserved the right to go back, but I think I'm ready. And I guess, and let's put it to the chat too. Is there any more CNCF related questions y'all want to ask before we move on to Kubernetes?
I mean, and there's honestly so much more we could even dig into with CNCF, because each one of the, like the TOC, for instance, they have tags, which is an acronym that we haven't gotten to yet.
Yes.
But at the same time, I mean, we don't have to necessarily dig into this because there's so many at this point. Tag used to be called SIG. And the reason why they're not called SIGs anymore is because of the confusion. There's just so many different kinds of SIGs within the community. So now they're called tags, which is technical advisory groups. And they report into the TOC. And what the technical advisory groups do, it's sort of like consultancy, if you will, for the TOC. So if the TOC needs help in either digging deeper with a project, for instance, like there's a tag for runtime. If the TOC needs the runtime tag to do deeper due diligence for one of their projects, then they'll do that. They also produce white papers. They produce like high-level documents that help contributors of these projects in those areas for growth. But our main mission with TOC and the tags is project growth, period. Right? Like we want these projects to succeed. So if you want projects to succeed, this is a great place to contribute, is those tags. And the tags actually have probably the lowest barrier of entry for new contributors, to be quite honest.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And I think that's just because the trust level there isn't as, it's not as extensive, meaning you don't have to build it for months of PRs. Where a tag, you just show up with your expertise and kind of add to the conversation and add to like white papers that are being collaborated on and things like that. So this is another carrot if folks are out there looking for ways to contribute. Google tags right now for CNCF, and you can see a list. One of them is contributor strategy, which is something that I bootstrapped. And that's exactly what it sounds like. It's how can these projects grow their contributor bases? How can they think about the strategy that's needed behind growing those contributor bases? Because that's something that I think but maintainers don't necessarily think about when they're incubating or sandboxing a project, is the fact that eventually it's going to get big. Or I mean, maybe if that's a goal of yours, eventually it could get bigger. And when it gets bigger, then it's a lot to take on. It's a lot. So the contributor strategy group is amazing. It's now run by Josh Burkus and Dawn Foster. Dawn, hello, VMware. Dawn, hey Dawn.
Hi, Dawn. Hi, Josh, too.
And they're both so wonderfully experienced and empathetic, and both of their skills together make a great leadership team for that crew. But I think that's the one major acronym that we probably forgot about with this crew.
But we didn't forget in the end. We do have some questions again.
Yeah.
Oh, we have a comment. Yay, we love Dawn. We really
do.
And then how does CNCF work? Why does it exist with so many projects, and are there any competitors for CNCF?
That's a big one. So let me break it down. So CNCF works by these bodies right here, and they also have staff, which is something we haven't talked about.
Oh, okay.
So the staff are full-time employees of CNCF, and they keep this ship afloat, and they keep this running and chugging along. So for instance, we have Amy who works with CNCF, and she does, I think she's director of like project programs and things like that. So from a, like, how does CNCF works? It works both from a, they have staff perspective, and then we have the board, and the board changes charters and things like that for how we operate. And then it says why it exists with a lot of projects.
So I have a question. Does like Kubernetes then not have staff? Do most of, okay, so
no, because CNCF is the foundation. Technically though, if we're getting really technical with it, the Linux Foundation is the nonprofit. The CNCF is actually a fund of the Linux Foundation. I didn't want to get that technical on this call, but it's still important to know that the Linux Foundation has a zillion, I mean, at least it feels like a zillion at this point, but a zillion sub-projects that are all other types of foundations. Like, for instance, you may have heard of the CDF, the Continuous Delivery Foundation.
Yes, I have.
You may have also heard of OpenSSF. Linux, that's also a Linux Foundation sub-foundation. Exactly, part of the Linux Foundation. Exactly, perfect. So when we talk about like how CNCF operates and like how to make changes and things like that, like, yes, the governing board, but then also, depending on what the change is, the Linux Foundation. That's sort of the hierarchy, if you will. But Kubernetes is not an entity, right? There's no like, this is a good way for us to start into Kubernetes too. But Kubernetes is not an entity. It is a literal project of the CNCF. Like, all of the trademarks and things like that are owned by CNCF at this point. So no one actually works at Kubernetes, if you will. Meaning like there is no like mega employer called Kubernetes, and we all just like hang out and work there. I think a lot of contributors would really like that though, because one of the things that you probably hear a lot is same team, different company.
Oh, okay.
When it comes to Kubernetes, and that's
nice.
a lot.
I love that.
Yeah, that's from maintainers who might switch companies and still get to work on Kubernetes. So it's same team, different company. But
I love that.
Yep. So Kubernetes, the largest of these CNCF projects.
And how many contributors did you say it has?
70,000.
Dang.
And this is one of those. That's all time. And you are indeed one of those. And I bet you so many people that are listening to this are actually one of those too. Because like when we define contributor, it's such a loose and broad definition on purpose, because we want to be so overly inclusive and we want people to participate with us in all facets and all ways. Like you'll hear different responses from people across the project as far as how they want people to participate with them. So participation could mean pull requests. It could mean issues. It can mean issue comments, which issue comments could be things like reviewing of the PRs and validation that the thing was going to work and your use case. So when we talk about issue comments. That's what we're talking about. That's issue comments always seem sort of ambiguous, right? But all of those things would be amazing ways to participate. And all of those people are rolled up into the 70,000 contributors. So we have some questions in chat. How does the CNCF relate to the Linux Foundation, other foundations like the CD Foundation? We just kind of answered that, actually.
I think that came in as we were answering it. We were on like the same wavelength.
Yeah.
Are there any competitors for CNCF?
Open source really doesn't work like that, I don't think. I mean, when we talk about competitors, not really, but we can always talk about that there's other foundations. Like there's other homes for people to put projects in. Yes. But the main the main advantage of CNCF and joining CNCF is that the network is the largest for cloud native. So if you have a cloud native project, it would make sense for you to come here. But I mean, there's other cloud native projects in many other foundations. There's the OpenStack Foundation, I think it's Open Infra these days. There's the Apache Software Foundation, which has some cloud native stuff, especially around like Spark and stuff. So definitely plenty of other open source foundations that folks can look into and see if it's right for them.
Excellent. And now we have another question. What do you donate when you propose a project to the CNCF? What does donate mean in this context?
Donate means all the things. So donate means that you are donating your code, your entire repository, your trademarks, your copyright. It kind of just like depends on what the thing is that you're donating. Like, are you donating a standard? Like, okay, then, we need the white paper. Go ahead.
What's your incentive for donating?
Like I said, one of the largest networks for cloud native. So you actually get a ton of support and things like that. And like I said, once you get to that incubation stage, you get to tap into all this amazing funding that CNCF has, which is another, I think, advantage of CNCF versus other orgs is there's money here. And you need money to grow a project. That's just plain and simple, especially in 2022. Things like I said before, security audits don't come down from the trees and are just given to you. Security audits from professionals are expensive. So that's just one benefit of CNCF.
And another one that George says is adoption and other contributors.
Yep, 100%.
That makes a lot of sense. We have another question. Can you say how and why Kubernetes picked up so much momentum?
I have so many responses to this one. First and foremost, I think that the founders and everyone that joined the project early had some really great ideas, and not just with like the code, but with how the community is built, and with the fact that they knew that they needed, in order to be this like portable thing that they wanted and that they were dreaming of, they knew that everybody had to play nice together, and in order to play nice, need to have open contributing guides, and you need to have shared ownership models, meaning not one org owns all of the code. And I think that shared ownership in open source is a major incentive for engineers. Like, why would I give all of my time to write this feature for you if at the end of the day I can't help its strategic direction go forward? So I think a lot of the momentum came from the belonging and the inclusivity of the project and how it was initially built. And
I don't know this firsthand, but I've been told that contributing to open source used to be more of a harsh situation where it wasn't so kind and inclusive.
Yeah, 100%.
And it was like Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, most things run a mailing list. I mean, and depending on, who's listening to this right now, they could probably they might cringe at this statement. But another reason why I think we've grown so much and there's been so much momentum is Slack. And
interesting.
Yes, we have 150,000+ members on Slack right now. And a lot of these people that are contributing on their day jobs or not on their day jobs, but most of them have some kind of full-time position somewhere, whether it's a cloud, whether it's like a major vendor, most of those folks are on Slack for their day jobs, right? So having day job and then Kubernetes right there, I think it the integration with people's lives and things really amped up the project tremendously, and the momentum from that has been, I think, fierce. So it's kind of two things. I think one, the human stuff that we thought about in the beginning, and then two, some of the tooling and things that we've built. And even on GitHub, we've built so much cool tooling there that helps guide contributors along. That I think that also has helped people want to contribute again, and that adds to that momentum.
That's a great answer. And then that leads me to ask, like, some people, it's their day job, like a company will pay them to be a Kubernetes contributor, right? What's the company's incentive to do that?
They have features they need to see through. Maybe it's because they are carrying tech debt right now and they have ways to make the project better for everyone by not carrying those huge patches anymore. Maybe it's because they want to align with upstream, because upstream has a ton of benefits, like docs, for instance, that you've been a part of. A lot of companies are using Kubernetes docs. So imagine if you're that close to the project and that aligned with upstream, then you get to use this amazing doc set. You don't have to start fresh with tech graders in your own your own area, writing your own special secret sauce stuff. But
George has a funny comment. There are more people in the Kubernetes Slack than in the population of Bellevue, Washington.
And that's hilarious. That's I'm gonna need to write that one down as a resident of Seattle.
I'm in the Kubernetes Slack. If you anyone listening, if you DM me there and give me your United States address, I'll totally mail you some Enlightning stickers.
Oh, yay! Yeah, I'm gonna need to do that after the call. So
yes, please. And then, is it frowned upon then as a company to use a bunch of CNCF projects and then not contribute?
No, I don't necessarily say frowned upon, because that's open source, and I think at the end of the day, we all know that is, that's a thing. It happens, and that's something that we all have to accept at the end of the day when we're throwing our code over the wall, is that other people are going to use it, and some people even can make money off of it. But I think one of the things about the cloud native community is we stress participation so much. We stress participation to the common good, because the only way, and going back to the momentum stuff, is we have so much momentum because of the humans that work on it. And because of the people here doing an amazing job of growing every facet of this community, right? So, it's super important for us to, encourage organizations to contribute back. And if your organization out there is not contributing now, but you want to, call me. We'll have an hour-long session on the ways your company can contribute. And not only that, but also have impact to your business. This is sort of the open source strategy, if you will, that companies need to start thinking about, is how are you participating in the stuff that you rely on, is the genuine question that I think every company should be having right now.
I agree
Literally
with that.
right now. And if the log for shell stuff didn't scare you, if Heartbleed didn't scare you, then so be it. Enjoy. Right? But I think having a seat at the table, especially if you're going to invest millions in something, is crucial. Is crucial. So that's with my my business hat on.
So that I think is a great segue into what does a seat at the Kubernetes table look like? How is the Kubernetes project organized? Yes. And are all the CNCF projects organized the same way, or is this type of organization unique only to Kubernetes?
Every project is indeed organized differently. So let's focus. Like that's why we should definitely focus on just Kubernetes, because otherwise we'll have we should just maybe have lightning series on the on CNCF project operations. But a lot of CNCF projects though have forked a lot of our governance models and a lot of our governance stuff. That doesn't mean that all of their things are the same and they operate in the same way. But a lot of the material, policies, guidelines, et cetera, that we have has been forked by several industry projects that you might know about, Knative being one. So from
model has seen a lot of success based on your answer to Lisa's question. Yeah.
Definitely. This model has seen a lot of success, but I do want to caveat that we are an extremely large project. We have a lot of people debt, not just tech debt, right? People, and when I say people debt, I mean, it means we go into detail on a lot of things that other projects should never go into. And the reason why is because we have so many people involved in the project that there's so many roles. For instance, I think it's 10 plus roles on the release team, and most projects don't need 10 plus people to run a release. Okay. So when I see projects out in the wild who have these 10 plus release teams and they go so far down deep, that stuff, honestly, it collects debt. It collects, and the debt that it collects is burnout. And it's almost overly doing it for your project, right? So I always give the advice for people to not be Kubernetes. Because unless you want your project to be a whale, unless you want your project to be this ginormous thing, and you think that the use cases are there too, which is obviously the more important thing, then follow us. Come on down the line. Come on. We'll give you all of the, we'll give you all of the advice you need. But at the end of the day, if your project isn't going to be this big,
you probably don't need all of it. That makes a lot of sense. We have a goodbye. I think our friend in India is going to bed. Good night. They're enlightened, and thanks so much. Now they know how CNCF works. Thank you. All right, let's do this.
Yes. So if you want a seat at the table, there's a lot of tables in Kubernetes. And the thing that I think people need to know the most is the SIGs. And SIGs are our main body, if you will, of governance. And that SIGs means special interest group. And a special interest group is different than the rest of the crews in CNCF, because special interest groups own code, period. That's why it's so hard to have some kind of instantaneous, what's the word I'm looking for? Instantaneous, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. This is hilarious. It's so hard. It's so hard for people to jump into a SIG and say hey, I want to be a maintainer here, because they're owning code, and you have to show maintainers that.
What's a maintainer, please?
Thank you. So funny enough that you should ask that, because in Kubernetes, we technically don't have the term maintainer. The reason why I say maintainer is because it's an industry term that a lot of folks do know. And a maintainer is simply, at the end of the day, the person that is merging the pull requests, right? They're the person at the very top that says, this is a go and let's go. They're the ones that are solely responsible for making sure that things that are going in are supposed to be going in, and whether that's going into the release, whether that's going into the core code base, whether it's, going into documentation. But the word that we use here instead of maintainer is owner.
Oh, dang. I thought it was member.
No,
from my experience in
so member,
I remember member was a thing.
Member is the first rung on our contributor ladder.
Okay.
And so this is how we establish trust. So if you're a company out there and you're like, wow, how do we get maintainers in Kubernetes? First, you need to send folks that are going to stick around. The second thing is they need to climb the contributor ladder, and they need to get to an owner status. And owners mean an owner's file, like a code owner's file, right? And in those code owners file, there's a few different roles. There's the reviewer and there's the approver. Now, note that the term member is not in there. Member is the first rung on this contributor ladder. And that means that you've done a few PRs and you're kind of starting your journey. And go ahead.
For drawing purposes, how many rungs are on the contributor ladder?
Member, reviewer, approver, subprep 4.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, 4. Oh, I see you drawing a little ladder.
Yeah, I am.
Yay.
Fun.
Yeah. So you're a member, and what the member means is that you've done a few PRs, you've stuck around long enough that a maintainer has taken notice, and either you or the maintainer asked to be a member, and you fill out a little issue template, and that membership gets you access to a few really awesome things. One of those awesome things is you get to run your own tests. So most people, when they drop by with a PR or anything like that, someone else needs to come on and say, okay to test. Because why? Tests are really expensive, come to find out. And when you're running them against a project this large, things can get really unwieldy very fast. I'm sure there's so many people out there that look at their cloud bills and their CI/CD bills, and same here. So yeah, there's a member. That's the first ladder. The contributor is technically the first ladder, which is I'm just someone out here helping out the project. And then member, and that's the GitHub org member. That means that you are now a GitHub org member. You can run your own tests, and we trust you enough to do that. The next step is reviewer. And reviewer is the one that is literally reviewing the content of the PRs, style guide stuff. And that role, we need so many more reviewers, you all. I can't overemphasize how many reviewers that we need. Every single SIG, which we'll get, we'll put that back burner, we'll go into the SIGs in a second. But every single SIG needs more reviewers. And there's 2 different kinds of reviewers that we need. One reviewer is somebody in an owner's file, right? But the second reviewer is literally anyone. Anyone can review code in the community. Literally anyone.
When I was in SIG Docs, I did a shadow where someone taught me how to review PR. So, and that was even not knowing much at all. It was a very
shout out to SIG Docs.
Yeah.
Shout out. Yeah, some of our SIGs do stuff like that. And that is a great way to jump in. So if you're out there and you have a SIG in mind, which we'll get to it, like I said, we'll get to in a second. That's a great way, is saying, hey, do you have any shadow programs? Do you have any mentoring programs? Stuff like that. So then the next rung on the ladder is approver / sub-project owner.
So member.
I actually like having contributor as the first rung because I might even add that to some of our docs, honestly.
Ooh, that makes me feel nice. So member, reviewer?
So contributor, member, reviewer.
Yeah.
Approver.
Okay.
And sub-project owner.
Project owner.
Yep. Let's dig into now SIG composition, because the sub-project owner is going to make so much more sense.
Okay.
All right. So now back to SIG. So SIG's own code, and the humans that are involved in these SIGs all have these roles, right? They're either contributor, member, reviewer, approver, project owner. So if you're a company out there and you're like, how do I get a seat at this table? How do I actually get involved? You join a SIG. At the end of the day, it's as simple as that. There are, I think, 28 SIGs now. So I don't think we should go into all of these.
Okay.
But there's a few different kinds of SIGs. There's the horizontal SIG.
Okay.
And there's the vertical SIG.
Okay.
And for instance, the vertical SIG is a technical domain. So for instance, networking.
Okay.
API machinery. If you're in chat, shout them out. I'm trying to think of scalability. Actually, scalability might be a bad one. Hold on. And then there is, so I'm sorry. Hold on.
Oh, it's all right.
API machinery is technically horizontal. That's what I apologize about. So vertical SIGs are service catalog, network, node, scheduling, storage. They're like the technical domains, right?
I have a question.
Yep.
Can I think of this in terms of vertical scaling versus horizontal scaling?
Yeah.
Like vertical is made once and horizontal is something that's replicated?
Kind of. Kind of. Yeah, okay. Because the deal with the horizontal SIGs are SIGs like API machinery, because their work is across all of those technical domains. So for instance, anytime that you make changes to the API, if you're in network or if you're in storage and you're making API changes, API machinery needs to approve, right? API machinery actually technically owns 40% of the code base. So it's one of the I think it's probably one of our hardest groups to get involved in. However, I really do think it's one of the most worthwhile groups to get involved in, because it's definitely one of those long tail things that is a part of your strategy at work. So if you're going to be doing a lot of things with the API, with the API, or if you're going to do, if you want to be an expert in that area and want to grow in that area, that's exactly where you would go. And then CLI is another horizontal SIG. And so speaking of I know you like DevX topics.
I do.
You do. This is a great place for DevX people to get involved. And so we've got these SIGs, right? And like I said, there's 27 of them. You can't map them all out right here. If each one of these SIGs has a charter, and that charter is their lifeblood. It's how they run. And that charter also does one cool thing, which is tells you what or not the charter, but their README and their charter together will tell you exactly what they own. And that's so important with a group this big. And people always ask me, Paris, why, if I just want to submit a PR, why do I need to know all this stuff? And I say it's because you need to know who owns what and who's going to approve your PR. And all of that stuff can actually be found in a charter. I'm actually going to I'm going to put a charter in chat.
That makes a ton of sense. Because if you have two different groups and it's not clear who owns it, you have different things coming from different directions.
Yep. And hold on. I'm putting SIG testing in chat.
While you do that, I'm going to shout out to chat. Madhav was helping us out with different SIGs when we were trying to think of some. And then Findle's here. Yay! Findle's listening in their car, so they're not chatting, Findle. But they're listening. Findle, hello. Tell Zilda hello. Great.
And Madhav, since you're listening, now that I know they're listening, do me a favor and put any SIG charter in the chat.
Yeah.
So folks can see what a charter looks like. And so when we talk about organizing humans around technology, this is literally the organization that we're talking about, right? We're talking about the who owns what charter, and people can converge on this, meaning people at different employers, they all obviously all have different things that are going on. However, many of them have commonalities, and especially of doing the thing the same way. So people get together in these SIGs and they talk about both new features, they talk about maintenance, they talk about all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, they're all taking care of this thing. So in CLI, for instance, they have a bunch of sub-projects.
Okay.
And it's kind of like, I always tell people, this is something else that people don't like when I make comparisons with, but it's almost like Kubernetes is a gigantic employer, because your employer has a bunch of departments, right? And all of those departments do something great that adds into the big product, right? That's how I look at SIGs. Like each SIG is a department. So like if you're imagine being a new employee, right, to be at VMware, like you probably
I don't have to imagine it.
Yeah, you have a group that you belong to. That group probably has some kind of charter. Maybe it's not called a charter, but it's called it's a document that leads your group, and it tells other people what you do, other people in the org. And in that group, though, you all have programs and products. Same with Kubernetes, except we call them differently. We call them sub-projects. So sub-projects are just pretty much just components. So for instance, with CLI, they're either components or features or actual legitimate programs. So for CLI, they have something called Customize.
I know Customize.
Yeah, Customize is a sub-project. So there are sub-project owners in that crew, and they're the toppest of the top of owners, and they're the ones that are really working on the high-level strategy of where things need to go with Customize, right? So that's the very tippity top of the contributor ladder, is that sub-project owner. And so people always ask me, well, okay, so these things, do they just govern themselves?
Yeah.
And I usually say yes and no. Yes, because they have, like I said, they have their charter, they have their defined ways of doing business, they have what's in scope and what's out of scope. But then there's this whole other body called the steering committee. And that's
one of your titles, isn't it?
Yeah. Ding.
And before we get too far off SIGs, I have one quick question.
Yeah.
You didn't mention your Contribex or my docs. Like, where do they fall in horizontal versus vertical?
So me and you fall into what we call project SIGs.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So there's.
I know we're limited on time.
I know we were limited on time, and I didn't necessarily want to get into that. But project SIGs are exactly what you think they are. There is no group that they don't touch.
Okay.
So like for instance, for docs, obviously docs touches every single group we have, even steering committee. Like the docs folks help, like shout out to Tim and Ray and all those folks who always help me with
Natalie,
with my writing and stuff like that. So Yeah, for Project SIGs, that means that there's no group that they don't touch, or help, or things like that. So,
all right.
So now we have the concept of committees, and one of them is steering. Steering is the highest level governance body that we have in the project. Not CNCF, but in the Kubernetes project.
And what's your role in the steering committee again?
I'm just a member. That's the only role that we have is member for that.
Members. Okay.
And it's 7 of us. And the cool part about the steering committee is that we have some rules, and those rules are things like no more than 2 people from any one employer.
Okay.
And all of this stuff has, again, helped with inclusion. It's helped with no kingmakers, meaning there's no one organization that, is running the show, if you will, quote, quote. We don't make any technical decisions in this group. That is the SIG for architecture. So SIG architecture makes technical decisions for the body, or for the project. And what's an example
of a decision you would make?
If we should hang a Black Lives Matter banner on the website.
Nice.
And yes, we did.
I vote yes. Yeah.
yeah. I vote yes. 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 I always like to feel very important in these meetings. Like, I vote yes. The big project matters, right? Things that span SIGs. Or if SIGs need to come to us to try to either negotiate something or gain or ask for funding. We also deal with funding. We're sort of this like, we're also a liaison to CNCF. So like when when there's big problems or big challenges or big opportunities, it doesn't need to be negative. All of that stuff kind of flows through steering committee. And the most important thing, kind of like TOC, is that we approve the charters for new groups. So it's kind of in that same like TOC where they approve projects. We approve projects that are in Kubernetes. So like if you had an idea for a new SIG, if you came to me and you were like, Paris, listen, we really need an Animal Crossing SIG. 1, I would agree with you. But 2, I would say, okay, well, start on what you think would be a charter, and then come to steering committee and let's talk about it.
Okay.
And that's where we would start. And of course, yes, we would most likely tell you, no, we can't have an Animal Crossing SIG, but but you can still try anyway.
You and I and Madhav can make our own unofficial one. And then Zappy's found where SIG stands in the corner. Funny, when I put your comment up, it hides it. Is SIG is special interest group.
Yeah, special
and
interest
then
group.
Can someone in the chat share the URL link for the list of SIGs, and if anyone's available to do that, that'd be very helpful. And then I have a quick question: did the gods of Kubernetes come up with this organizational structure, or borrow from some other org? I think we're talking to one of the gods. Lisa, you and me, Lisa May. Not a king, but yeah.
No, I think that a lot of this was borrowed. I think there are so many other open source projects that operate with special interest groups like IEE, and there's other like technical bodies, if you will, that operate with this idea of people needing to get shit done, right? Like, because like the project is so big, you all, like, and this is what I tried, like, because people always think like, oh, that's just too overwhelming. One of the reasons why it's overwhelming is because people need to have smaller groups to get work done. You know this at work. Like, I know people at work, like when you're working on a ginormous project, it can get really difficult with like 45 hands in the pot, right?
Yeah.
So these groups really help help people get work done and organize that work in a team way where it makes sense.
Okay. Time is precious, so let's get laser focused on these governing bodies so we get a full picture. Cool.
So then the other steering committee, or excuse me, the other two committees that we have are Code of Conduct Committee.
Okay.
And that's another pink box.
Okay.
And then the second one, or the third one rather, is security. Is a security. Are they calling themselves response committee these days? Sorry, y'all. I think they've switched their name a few times, but the Security Response Council, they do exactly what the name sounds. They take in security concerns. They deal with
I'm covering my face.
They deal with vulnerabilities that get reported, CVEs, the communication of those said CVEs, dealing with embargoed stuff. It's a really important group, you all. This is one of our most highly trusted crews. It is a little hard, obviously, to get into that group because you do need to have some kind of either security background or, have been on the project for a while and are highly trusted. So yeah, that crew is definitely a little bit, I'd say, harder to get into. But if you're out there and you are a security professional and you do think you can add value, please look up their charter and see how you can get involved, and things like that.
Excellent.
And then the Code of Conduct Committee. Go ahead.
Okay, quick question in the chat. Do CNCF members have a day job, or is being a member the
Yeah, CNCF members, well, technically CNCF members are member companies. So from a meta sense, yes, they all have jobs. But from a contributor perspective, I would say anywhere between 95 to 99% of us have a full-time job. It's the majority. We do have a lot of independent contributors as well. And those independent contributors, though, they also have full-time jobs. Like they have their own consulting companies. They have, a company that they work for that's not related to Kubernetes. So
they do it for funsies.
Yeah, some people do it for funsies. It's not many, but there are definitely a few hobbyists.
All right, we have 1 minute, I think. I don't know how hard your stop is, but can you tell us about Code of Conduct Committee?
Yeah, and then honestly, I think we're done.
Sweet.
But Code of Conduct Committee is a lovely bunch of professionals who take in reports for people who might not be displaying the best behavior. And they instill our values and they enforce our values and they help us with making our project the most inclusive that we can have. They're also great with mediation. At the end of the day, there's things like cultural differences. There's things like just making bad word choices, right? Like at the end of the day. And I love
I'm like, I drew myself, this is my normal height. And so now I stand with my legs split, but I'm wearing socks. So I'm kind of like, okay.
But yeah, no, they are wonderful. They deal with a lot of emotional labor. They should be praised and accoladed all of the time. And people always ask me like, well, I mean, how many Code of Conduct incidents are you all dealing with a year? Like, what are we talking about here? And honestly, it's a few. Like every community has, one person that's going to act up. And it's not necessarily about how many people are acting up, but it's about what are you doing about the people that are acting up, right? And that is so important.
It makes people feel safe. Like if you like, it's important.
It's important that people understand and know that we tell other people that we don't do that here. Right. Like Aja Hammerly wrote an amazing article like a couple of years ago called We Don't Do That Here. And it's all about how communities should step up and tell people, like, if you're sitting next to someone and they're just saying guys like 400 times, you can say like, hey, listen, we don't do that here. We usually just say like folks or y'all.
Yeah.
That's the mediation that I'm talking about. Like, it's not reprimanding someone. It's not banning someone over the fact that they said that. It's stepping and having that kind of teachable, that teachable time and that experience for people. And it's helped the project immensely.
Absolutely. This has been amazing and everything that I hoped and dreamed it would be. I think we have a beautiful board, and I have a much clearer understanding of, I guess one thing we didn't talk about is just like elections, and we touched on it here. Is it the same here? Like if you just want to jump on, you can put your name in the hat.
So for steering committee, there's an election, and the cool thing is if you're out there and you want to sit on the code of conduct committee and you have code of conduct experience, or if that's it's an area that you want to help out with, we are having an election coming up and we'll start taking nominations. So please watch out on the Kubernetes developer mailing list. Because people can and that's a great group for folks to get involved with. So please nominate folks for that, and we'll have we actually have an election. I think it's in September.
What's a CNCF ambassador?
A CNCF ambassador is someone who just reps all of the projects that they rep CNCF. They are another group of people. I'm not sure if they fall. I don't know if they fall technically anywhere in that group structure now that I think about it.
Okay.
But yeah. They are people that rep. They're kind of like DevRel, if you will, but they're it's all volunteers. It's another way of contributing to CNCF if you're in DevRel.
Cool. All right. I appreciate your time and your expertise. It's been such a gift to have you here. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone in the chat and everyone who wants to.
Oh my gosh, I know there was so many questions. I know no one asks me questions ever about the human side. So I loved all of the questions. Lisa, you rocked. Thank you.
Appreciate everyone. Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye, y'all.